Welcome to the Jaron Jarvis channel. I am Jaron Jarvis. Today, I would like to introduce to you, Disneyland Abductions. I remember everything. It is unfortunate that the next words I say could be taken as untrue. Maybe it's better that way. Nobody fucking listens to me, anyway. Nobody believes half of the awful shit that I have been through. But, after the recent post, here, by the user Colorblindness, this feels like the right forum to finally say this next line aloud. My family was abducted by aliens in Disneyland. You would be amazed by how quickly people have turned away from that concept. Like it's crazy. Like I am crazy. And yet, there are approximately 10 trillion planets in our galaxy. 3 weeks ago, a 12-mile-wide lake was discovered on Mars. Enceladus has a subsurface ocean, Europa is covered in ice, and Kepler 186f has been called an alien Earth, even without the advantage of sight. It just seems absurd that some would doubt the existence of extraterrestrial life. I have seen them. I remember them. It rained the whole drive down to Disneyland. Dad drove. Mom sat in the front. Me and my 6-year-old sister crammed in the back with a couple stale burgers and melted sodas. It was one of many miserable family road trips. We had to keep the windows up to avoid dripping water. And the AC was broken. The stifling heat of the backseat joined forces with the nervous energy of my mother to create combustible arguments that erupted every fucking 5 minutes. That's the exit. Shit, we missed it again. Turn down the music, Mark. Maybe that was the reason the trip took 11 hours instead of 8. My father had this old Springsteen CD from the 80s. On each and every road trip, he bumped the bass well past the speaker capacity of our wood-paneled station wagon. He said the songs reminded him of home. When Dad was behind the wheel, with his CDs, he was in the zone. It was like the music gave him immunity to the constant bickering back and forth. I can still hear the track Born to Run imprinted on my wretched memory of what comes next. By the time we got to the park in Anaheim, it was dark and close to closing time. There were a few other families milling around the concession stands and waterlogged benches. But, not many. I suspect that some of them may be the folks that have already come forward. The windy weather and late hour was not on our side. At that time, most of the games and stations had already shut their gates. The dimmed lights and pounding rain gave the black streets of the park an ominous and depressing vibe. But Sydney insisted on one ride before we went back to the hotel for the night. Please, Mum. Please, Dad. Just one. They caved, as they always did, to her demands. It was easier that way. Better to avoid a tantrum whenever possible. We scoured the park for about 15 minutes, looking for something that was open. Eventually, Sid settled on a partially indoor ride to hide from the growing downpour and concerning flashes of heat lightning. The queue was completely empty. Dad had to knock on some door 3 times just to get someone's attention. After 5 minutes, he finally yelled, "Hello." And a man in an official Disney uniform opened up immediately. After some hesitation, he stepped aside, and let us pass. He offered one line over his shoulder, "Before leaving the same way we came in, need to lock up behind you. Exit will be on the other side." The line extended through hollow corridors and open courtyards. Eventually, we landed in an exotic pet cemetery with several detailed and decorated graves. Of course, Sid was infatuated. She ducked beneath the small guardrails to examine each of them, one at a time. It was pouring rain. I begged the kid to hurry it up. But my parents were no help. They seemed to be stuck inside of the romanticism of the dark night. I caught them kissing in a corner just as a massive vibration shook the siding. At first, that noise sounded like a plane. I asked my dad if there was an airport nearby. He nodded and shook his head at the same time. He seemed confused. The noise, and the vibration that came with it, only grew louder. Soon, it was so goddamn obnoxious that the headstones started to shake in the ground itself. I looked up. Perfectly placed above the gap in the roofing, something metallic was hovering above us. Then, the night erupted with a blinding light. The pulsing vibration that followed that was so strong that it knocked me to my feet. The combination of the two was enough to blur to my senses altogether. I could see not anything. Everyone's voice sounded hollow. But, unfortunately, I heard some things. I could hear my sister cry. I could hear my father rousing himself, yelling nonsense to the background of the vibrations. It was an empty, shocked, begging type of threat. I could hear something massive tossing him to the side. I could hear my mother scream, and beg the open air for her life. But something silenced her. The last sound she made was a loud, exasperated sigh. Then, all of a sudden, I felt alone inside the ride. Hundreds of small, pattering feet filled the room. I tried to speak to them, but I couldn't breath. My mouth opened and shut like a trout. Suddenly, I was completely paralyzed, and every limb in my body was covered in pain. My instincts screamed that I needed to get out. The owners of the feet started to click to one another. They seemed excited. Or they were arguing. I couldn't tell the difference. The noises they made was rhythmic. Each sentence rose up and down like a language, with cadence and emphasis. But none of it made any sense. One of them scratched the floor oddly as he shook his weight in my direction. Then, there was a soft, suckling sound of wet body parts slithering alongside each other. My shirt was lifted. Without warning, I could feel a small metallic object slide inside the ring of my belly button. A moment later, I felt the pressure of 1,000 pins falling inwards on my forehead. And then, suddenly, I was somewhere else. I woke up in the parking lot outside a Wawa in New Jersey 2 weeks later with a family of 5 shouting in my face. It felt like a moment. Due diligence has been done, by the police, to find my parents and Sydney. They have been unsuccessful. The cameras operating at the park were out that night, due to the storm. The toll plazas on the highways, suspiciously, suffered the problem. There is no record, anywhere, that we ever even made it to the theme park. As far as they know, we could have been home all weekend. But, we were not alone that night. There were other families in the park, with children and lives of their own. I have heard they have been affected as well. The date of my trip was August 1, 2018. If there is anyone else, in the interest of gathering information, please come forward. Update. Another user has reported something similar.